Mother bear learned surgery. Watching YouTube to save injured baby. What happened next was incredible. The morning mist clung to the ancient pines like whispered secrets, creating a world where reality seemed to bend at the edges. Ethan Marshall adjusted the focus on his laptop screen, watching the live feed from camera 17 with the same quiet fascination he had felt every morning for the past 3 months. The forest stretched endlessly before him through multiple camera angles, a vast wilderness where he had been documenting the behavior of a black bear family that had captured his attention in ways he couldn't quite explain. The mother bear, whom he had named Sophia in his research notes, moved through the frame with a grace that seemed almost deliberate. Her thick, dark fur caught the early sunlight as she foraged near a fallen log, occasionally glancing toward the dense undergrowth where her young cub, barely 6 months old, tumbled and played with the carefree abandon that only the very young possess. Ethan had been studying animal behavior for nearly a decade, but there was something different about this particular bear family, something that made him feel as though he was observing more than just instinctual survival patterns. The research station where Ethan worked sat nestled in a clearing about 15 miles from the bears' territory, close enough to maintain his camera network, but far enough to avoid disturbing their natural routines. The small cabin was filled with monitors, recording equipment, and stacks of research journals that documented years of wildlife observations. His coffee had grown cold hours ago, but he barely noticed, completely absorbed in watching Sophia teach her cub the subtle art of finding food in the forest floor. The cub, with its oversized ears and clumsy movements, reminded Ethan of a child learning to walk. It would stumble over roots, get distracted by butterflies, and occasionally tumble down small embankments only to scramble back up with renewed determination. Sophia watched her offspring with what could only be described as patience, occasionally nudging the little one back toward safer ground or demonstrating the proper technique for overturning logs to find insects underneath. As the morning progressed, Ethan found himself drawn deeper into their world. The way Sophia communicated with her cub seemed to go beyond simple grunts and physical guidance. There were subtle head movements, specific postures, and even what appeared to be deliberate pauses that suggested a complex language of understanding between mother and child. He made notes in his journal, trying to capture these observations in scientific terms, but finding that words somehow fell short of describing the emotional depth he witnessed through his cameras. The forest itself seemed to participate in their daily routine. Birds would call warnings when humans approached the area. Squirrels would chatter information about food, sources, and even the wind seemed to carry messages between the trees. Ethan had always believed that nature operated on levels of communication far more sophisticated than humans typically recognized, but watching Sophia and her cub had begun to convince him that intelligence in the wild might be far more profound than any research had ever documented. Around midday, the peaceful rhythm of observation was interrupted by a sound that made Ethan's blood run cold. Through the audio feed from camera 17, he heard the cub's distressed cry, a sound unlike anything he had recorded before. The little bear had wandered closer to a steep rocky outcrop than usual, and in its playful exploration had apparently slipped and fallen several feet onto jagged stones below. Ethan's hands flew to his keyboard, switching between camera angles to get a better view of the situation. The cub lay motionless at the bottom of the rocky slope, a dark stain spreading beneath its small body. Sophia's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. She rushed to her offspring, her massive form moving with surprising speed and agility down the treacherous slope. The sounds coming through the audio feed were unlike anything Ethan had ever heard from a wild animal, a mixture of concern, fear, and what could only be described as grief. From his position miles away, Ethan felt completely helpless. His research protocols strictly forbade interference with natural wildlife processes, but watching the scene unfold made every instinct in his body scream for action. He reached for his radio to contact the nearest wildlife rescue team, but hesitated, knowing that by the time help could arrive, it would likely be too late. The nearest road was hours away through difficult terrain, and helicopter rescue in this remote area was virtually impossible due to the dense forest canopy. Sophia circled her injured cub, making soft vocalizations that seemed to be attempts at communication or comfort. She gently nudged the little one with her nose, trying to encourage movement, but the cub remained still, except for the shallow rise and fall of its breathing. The injury appeared to be serious, a deep gash along the cub's side that was bleeding steadily onto the rocky ground below. What happened next would haunt Ethan's memory for years to come. Instead of the panic or resignation he might have expected from a wild animal facing such a crisis, Sophia began to display behavior that seemed almost impossibly deliberate. She left her injured cub for several minutes, disappearing from the camera's view, only to return carrying something in her mouth that glinted in the filtered sunlight. Ethan leaned closer to his monitor, adjusting the zoom and brightness settings to get a clearer view. What Sophia had retrieved appeared to be an old smartphone, its screen cracked but apparently still functional. The device must have been dropped by a hiker weeks or months earlier, gradually making its way down the slope to rest among the rocks where Sophia had found it. But what struck Ethan as truly extraordinary was not that she had found the phone, but the way she seemed to be examining it with purposeful intent. The bear positioned herself near her cub, holding the phone at various angles as if trying to find the best lighting or perspective. The device's screen flickered to life, apparently activated by her touch, and Sophia's reaction was unlike anything Ethan had ever witnessed in his years of wildlife research. Rather than being startled or frightened by the glowing screen, she seemed fascinated, almost mesmerized by whatever she was seeing displayed there. Ethan's scientific training told him that what he was observing had to have some rational explanation. Perhaps the bear was simply curious about the unusual object, or maybe the screen's glow reminded her of sunlight reflecting off water. But, as he continued to watch, Sophia's behavior became increasingly difficult to explain through conventional understanding of animal cognition. She held the phone steady for long periods, her eyes fixed on the screen with an intensity that suggested active engagement rather than mere curiosity. Occasionally, she would shift her position, as if trying to get a better view of something specific, and her free paw would move across the screen in what appeared to be deliberate gestures. The most unsettling aspect of her behavior was how she would periodically look down at her injured cub, then back at the phone, as if comparing what she was seeing on the screen to the reality of her situation. The afternoon sun began to shift, casting longer shadows across the rocky outcrop where the drama was unfolding. Ethan realized he had been holding his breath for long periods, completely absorbed in trying to understand what he was witnessing. His scientific objectivity was being challenged by something that seemed to transcend normal categories of animal behavior, something that suggested levels of intelligence and problem-solving ability that shouldn't have been possible according to everything he had learned about bear cognition. As the hours passed, Sophia's focus on the phone never wavered. She seemed to be studying whatever was displayed on the screen with the kind of concentrated attention that Ethan associated with students learning new and complex information. The injured cub remained stable but motionless, its breathing steady but shallow, while its mother continued her mysterious interaction with the glowing device. The forest around them had grown quiet, as if the other wildlife sensed that something significant was happening. Even the usual afternoon chorus of birds and insects seemed muted, creating an atmosphere of hushed expectation that made Ethan feel as though he was witnessing something far more profound than a simple wildlife emergency. As evening approached, Sophia finally set the phone aside and began what could only be described as a systematic search of the surrounding area. She moved with purpose, examining specific plants, rocks, and other natural materials with the same focused attention she had given to the phone's screen. Her selection process seemed highly selective, as if she was looking for items that met very specific criteria. Ethan watched in growing amazement as Sophia collected what appeared to be a carefully chosen assortment of forest materials. She gathered several types of moss, some with antimicrobial properties that Ethan recognized from his botanical studies. She selected specific stones that were smooth and sharp-edged, and strips of inner bark from certain trees known for their fibrous strength. Each item was examined carefully before being accepted into her growing collection. The most remarkable aspect of her gathering behavior was how methodical it appeared. This wasn't the random collection of a confused or desperate animal, but rather the purposeful accumulation of materials that seemed to serve specific functions. Ethan found himself making detailed notes about each item Sophia selected, trying to understand the logic behind her choices. As darkness began to fall across the forest, Sophia returned to her injured cub with her collection of natural materials. The phone lay nearby, its screen still glowing faintly in the gathering dusk, casting strange shadows across the rocky outcrop. What happened next would challenge everything Ethan thought he knew about the boundaries between human and animal intelligence. Sophia began to organize her collected materials in a way that seemed to follow some kind of systematic plan. She arranged the different types of moss in separate piles, sorted the stones by size and sharpness, and laid out the bark strips in neat parallel lines. The organization was so methodical that it reminded Ethan of a surgeon preparing instruments before an operation, a comparison that made him deeply uncomfortable given the apparent impossibility of what it implied. The night air carried the sounds of the forest settling into its evening rhythms, but the area around Sophia and her cub remained strangely quiet. Ethan adjusted his camera settings to compensate for the low light, grateful that his research equipment included infrared capabilities that would allow him to continue observing even in complete darkness. What he saw in the infrared glow of his night vision cameras would stay with him for the rest of his life. Sophia positioned herself next to her injured cub and began to work with her collected materials in ways that seemed to demonstrate not just intelligence, but actual knowledge of medical principles that should have been completely beyond the scope of animal understanding. The mystery was deepening with each passing hour, and Ethan realized that he was no longer simply observing animal behavior. He was witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness, learning, and the hidden depths of intelligence that might exist throughout the natural world. As he settled in for what he knew would be a sleepless night of observation, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to witness something that would change his understanding of life itself. Chapter 2. The Glowing Screen. The infrared glow from Ethan's night vision cameras painted the forest in ghostly shades of green and silver, transforming the familiar landscape into something otherworldly. Sophia moved through this ethereal light with a purpose that seemed to transcend normal animal behavior, her massive form appearing almost spectral as she carefully arranged her collected materials around her motionless cub. The phone continued to emit its pale blue light, creating a small circle of illumination that seemed to serve as the center of some incomprehensible ritual. Ethan had called his colleague Lily Morgan hours earlier, and she was now driving through the night to reach his research station. Lily was one of the most experienced veterinarians he knew, specializing in wildlife medicine and emergency care. If anyone could help him understand what he was witnessing, it would be her. But even as he waited for her arrival, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were both about to encounter something that would challenge their most basic assumptions about animal intelligence. The cub's condition appeared to have stabilized somewhat, though the injury was clearly serious. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped, and the little bear remained unconscious or deeply weakened. In the wild, such injuries were often fatal, and Ethan had witnessed enough wildlife emergencies to know that without immediate veterinary intervention, the cub's chances of survival were minimal. What made this situation so extraordinary was Sophia's apparent refusal to accept this natural outcome. She had positioned the phone at an angle where its screen was clearly visible to her, and she continued to interact with it in ways that defied explanation. Her large paws moved across the touchscreen with surprising delicacy, occasionally causing the display to change or shift to different content. Ethan had enhanced his audio equipment to maximum sensitivity, and he could hear soft sounds coming from the device, suggesting that Sophia had somehow activated video content. The idea that a wild bear could navigate a smartphone interface was absurd by any conventional measure of animal cognition. Bears were intelligent creatures, capable of problem-solving and tool use in limited contexts, but the kind of abstract thinking required to understand digital interfaces should have been completely beyond their capabilities. Yet Ethan was watching Sophia demonstrate exactly this kind of sophisticated interaction with technology. Through his telephoto lenses, Ethan could occasionally glimpse what appeared to be playing on the phone's screen. The images were blurry and difficult to make out clearly, but they seemed to show human hands performing various actions, possibly medical or first aid procedures. The audio was too faint and distorted to understand clearly, but it had the rhythmic cadence of instructional content, the kind of step-by-step guidance that might be found in educational videos. Sophia's attention alternated between the phone's screen and her injured cub, and Ethan began to notice a pattern in her behavior. She would watch the screen intently for several minutes, then turn to examine her cub's wound, then return to the screen as if comparing what she was seeing with her actual situation. This back-and-forth pattern continued for hours, suggesting a level of cognitive processing that seemed impossible according to everything science understood about bear intelligence. Around midnight, Lily's headlights finally cut through the darkness as her vehicle navigated the rough forest road leading to Ethan's research station. She had made the 3-hour drive in record time, motivated by Ethan's increasingly urgent phone calls describing what he was witnessing. As a veterinarian, she was naturally skeptical of claims about extraordinary animal behavior, but she had worked with Ethan long enough to know that he wasn't prone to exaggeration or misinterpretation. Lily burst through the cabin door carrying her emergency veterinary kit, ready to attempt a rescue mission if necessary. But when Ethan showed her the live camera feeds, she stopped short, her professional skepticism giving way to amazement and confusion. What they were watching together defied every principle of animal behavior that either of them had learned in their respective fields. "This is impossible," Lily whispered, staring at the monitor showing Sophia's continued interaction with the smartphone. "Bears don't have the cognitive architecture for this kind of abstract learning. Their brains simply aren't wired for understanding symbolic representations or following complex visual instructions." But even as she spoke, they could both see Sophia demonstrating exactly the kind of behavior that Lily was claiming to be impossible. The bear had somehow managed to navigate to what appeared to be a video about treating deep wounds, and she was watching the content with the focused attention of a dedicated student. Her occasional vocalizations seemed to indicate recognition or understanding, as if she was processing information and making connections between what she was seeing and her current situation. Ethan had been documenting everything meticulously, taking screenshots of the phone's screen when possible, and making detailed notes about Sophia's behavior patterns. The scientific part of his mind insisted that there had to be some rational explanation for what they were observing, but the evidence was becoming increasingly difficult to explain through conventional understanding of animal cognition. Look at how she's organizing those materials." Lily pointed to another camera angle showing Sophia's collection of forest items. "That's not random gathering behavior. She's sorted everything by type and apparent function. Those moss varieties have different antiseptic properties. The stones are arranged by sharpness and size, and those bark strips are from trees known for their fibrous strength and flexibility." The implications of what Lily was describing were staggering. If Sophia was indeed selecting materials based on their medical properties, it suggested not just intelligence but actual knowledge of natural pharmacology and wound treatment principles. Such knowledge would typically require years of study and training, even for humans with advanced educational backgrounds. As they continued to watch, Sophia's behavior became even more extraordinary. She began to use some of the sharper stones to carefully clean debris from her cub's wound, working with a precision and gentleness that reminded both researchers of surgical techniques they had observed in veterinary operating rooms. Her movements were deliberate and methodical, as if she was following a specific protocol rather than acting on instinct alone. The most unsettling aspect of her wound cleaning procedure was how she periodically returned to the phone to reference what appeared to be instructional content. She would watch a segment of video, then attempt to replicate the demonstrated technique on her cub's injury, making adjustments and refinements based on what she had observed on the screen. This pattern of observation, application, and refinement suggested a level of learning ability that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence. "We need to document this more thoroughly," Ethan said, adjusting his recording equipment to capture multiple camera angles simultaneously. "Whatever we're witnessing here, it's going to require extensive analysis and peer review before anyone will believe it." Lily nodded, but she was clearly struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with her professional training. As a veterinarian, she had spent years studying animal behavior and cognition, and nothing in her experience had prepared her for observing a wild animal demonstrate such sophisticated problem-solving abilities. The techniques Sophia was using to treat her cub's wound were not just intelligent. They were medically sound approaches that showed understanding of infection prevention and tissue healing principles. Throughout the early morning hours, Sophia continued her methodical treatment of the cub's injury. She used different types of moss to create what appeared to be antiseptic compresses, applied them to the wound with careful attention to coverage and pressure, and secured them in place using the fibrous bark strips she had collected. Her technique was remarkably similar to field dressing procedures used by human medics, complete with attention to maintaining sterile conditions and proper wound drainage. The cub began to show signs of improvement as Sophia's treatment progressed. Its breathing became stronger and more regular, and it occasionally made soft sounds that seemed to indicate reduced pain or discomfort. The bleeding had stopped completely, and the makeshift bandaging appeared to be holding securely despite the cub's occasional movements. "This is unprecedented," Lily murmured, making her own detailed notes about the medical techniques they were observing. "I've seen some remarkable examples of animal intelligence in my career, but nothing that approaches this level of sophisticated problem-solving and knowledge application. If we can document this properly, it could revolutionize our understanding of animal cognition." But even as she spoke, Lily was aware that documenting such extraordinary behavior would present significant challenges. The scientific community was naturally conservative when it came to claims about animal intelligence, particularly claims that suggested cognitive abilities previously thought to be uniquely human. They would need extensive video evidence, multiple expert witnesses, and rigorous analysis to have any hope of convincing their peers that what they were witnessing was genuine. As dawn began to break over the forest, casting the first pale light across the rocky outcrop where Sophia continued her vigil, Both researchers realized that they had witnessed something that would change their lives and careers forever. The implications of what they had observed extended far beyond animal behavior research, touching on fundamental questions about consciousness, intelligence, and the nature of learning itself. Sophia had somehow managed to acquire and apply medical knowledge that should have been completely beyond the capabilities of a wild animal. She had used technology in ways that suggested abstract reasoning and symbolic thinking. Most remarkably, she had demonstrated the kind of caring, purposeful behavior that spoke to emotional depths and intellectual capabilities that challenged everything science thought it knew about non-human intelligence. The phone's battery was finally beginning to fade, its screen growing dimmer as the morning light grew stronger. But Sophia's work appeared to be complete. She had created what could only be described as a professional quality field dressing for her cub's wound, using materials and techniques that showed sophisticated understanding of medical principles. The little bear was breathing steadily, showing signs of recovery that seemed almost miraculous given the severity of its initial injury. As Ethan and Lily prepared to venture into the forest to retrieve the phone and gather additional evidence of what they had witnessed, they both understood that they were about to embark on a journey that would challenge not just their professional understanding, but their entire worldview about the nature of intelligence and consciousness in the natural world. The mystery was far from solved, and the questions raised by Sophia's extraordinary behavior would likely take years to fully explore and understand. The morning mist was beginning to lift from the forest floor, revealing a world that looked exactly the same as it had the day before, but somehow felt completely different. In the space of a single night, two experienced researchers had witnessed something that suggested the boundaries between human and animal intelligence might be far more fluid than anyone had ever imagined. The implications of this discovery would ripple outward in ways they were only beginning to comprehend, opening up entirely new avenues of research and understanding about the hidden depths of consciousness that might exist throughout the natural world. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy above, casting dancing patterns of light and shadow across the forest floor, where Sophia continued her careful vigil over her injured cub. Ethan and Lily had spent the entire night documenting what they were witnessing, but nothing could have prepared them for what they observed as the morning light revealed the full extent of Sophia's remarkable work. The makeshift medical dressing she had created using forest materials was not only holding securely, but appeared to be facilitating genuine healing in ways that defied conventional understanding of natural recovery processes. The cub stirred slightly as the warmth of the morning sun reached their rocky shelter, making soft sounds that indicated significantly reduced distress compared to the previous evening. Its breathing had become deep and regular, and there were subtle signs of returning strength in the way it occasionally shifted position or responded to its mother's gentle nudges. Sophia remained close by, her massive form creating a protective barrier between her offspring and the rest of the world. But her demeanor had shifted from the desperate urgency of the night before to something that could only be described as cautious optimism. Through their network of cameras, Ethan and Lily watched as Sophia carefully examined her cub's condition, using her sensitive nose and gentle paws to assess the effectiveness of her treatment. Her movements were deliberate and methodical, reminiscent of a medical professional conducting a thorough patient evaluation. She would sniff delicately around the edges of the wound dressing, checking for signs of infection or complications, then gently feel along the cub's body for any other injuries she might have missed in the darkness and urgency of the previous night. The smartphone that had played such a crucial role in the night's events lay nearby, its battery now completely drained and its screen dark. But its presence served as a tangible reminder of the extraordinary events they had all witnessed. A piece of technology that had somehow bridged the gap between human knowledge and animal intelligence in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of learning and consciousness. Lily had been taking detailed notes throughout the night, documenting not just Sophia's behavior, but also the specific materials she had used and the techniques she had employed. As a veterinarian with extensive experience in emergency wildlife care, Lily could appreciate the sophistication of the treatment approach Sophia had developed. The bear had essentially performed a complex field surgery using only natural materials and knowledge somehow acquired from watching instructional videos on a smartphone screen. The implications of what they had witnessed were staggering from both scientific and philosophical perspectives. If Sophia had indeed learned medical techniques by observing digital content, it suggested cognitive capabilities that went far beyond anything previously documented in wild animals. The ability to understand symbolic representations, follow complex visual instructions, and apply abstract knowledge to real-world situations had long been considered uniquely human traits. As the morning progressed, Sophia began to show signs that her immediate crisis management was complete, and she was ready to focus on longer-term recovery strategies for her cub. She started making short foraging trips away from their rocky shelter, always staying within sight of her offspring, but gradually expanding her search radius as she looked for specific plants and materials that might support the healing process. Her selection criteria seemed to be based on knowledge of natural pharmacology that would typically require years of study for human practitioners to master. Ethan realized that they were witnessing not just an isolated incident of remarkable animal behavior, but potentially the beginning of a new understanding of how intelligence and learning might operate throughout the natural world. The questions raised by Sophia's actions went far beyond simple animal cognition research, touching on fundamental issues about consciousness, knowledge transmission, and the hidden depths of awareness that might exist in species previously considered to have limited intellectual capabilities. The cub's recovery continued to progress at a rate that amazed both researchers. By midday, the little bear was able to lift its head and make weak but determined attempts to move around their rocky shelter. The wound dressing remained securely in place, showing no signs of the complications that might typically be expected from such a serious injury, treated under primitive conditions. Sophia's medical intervention appeared to be not just effective, but remarkably successful by any standard of emergency care. Lily found herself constantly comparing what she was observing to her own veterinary training and experience. The techniques Sophia had used were not just intelligent improvisations, but medically sound approaches that demonstrated understanding of infection control, wound management, and tissue healing principles. The bear had somehow acquired and applied knowledge that represented centuries of accumulated human medical wisdom, compressed into a single night of desperate learning and application. Throughout the afternoon, Sophia continued to monitor her cub's condition with the attentiveness of a dedicated nurse. She would periodically check the wound dressing, adjust the cub's position to ensure optimal comfort and healing, and provide gentle encouragement through soft vocalizations and physical contact. Her behavior demonstrated not just intelligence but emotional depth and caring that spoke to the profound bonds that existed between mother and offspring across species lines. The forest around them had returned to its normal rhythms of daily life, with birds singing, insects buzzing, and other wildlife going about their usual activities. But for Ethan and Lily, observing from their remote research station, the world had fundamentally changed. They had witnessed something that challenged core assumptions about the nature of intelligence, learning, and consciousness, opening up entirely new avenues of research and understanding that would likely take decades to fully explore. As evening approached, Sophia made a decision that surprised both researchers. She carefully gathered up the now dead smartphone, along with several of the unused materials from her medical supplies, and began to move her recovering cub to a new location deeper in the forest. Her movements were slow and deliberate, allowing the injured cub to travel at its own pace, while ensuring that it remained safe and protected throughout the journey. The relocation process took several hours, with Sophia stopping frequently to rest and check on her cub's condition. But what struck both researchers as most remarkable was how she maintained possession of the smartphone throughout the journey, treating it as a valuable resource rather than simply abandoning it as a useless piece of human technology. Her continued interest in the device suggested that she understood its potential value, even though its battery was depleted and it could no longer display the instructional content that had been so crucial the night before. By the time darkness fell again over the forest, Sophia had successfully relocated her small family to a more secure den site that offered better protection and access to the specific plants and materials she had been seeking throughout the day. The cub was showing remarkable signs of recovery, able to move independently for short distances, and beginning to show interest in food and its surrounding environment. Ethan and Lily spent hours discussing the implications of what they had witnessed, trying to develop a framework for understanding and documenting their observations in ways that might be accepted by the broader scientific community. The evidence they had collected was extensive and compelling, but they both understood that claims about such extraordinary animal behavior would require rigorous analysis and multiple forms of verification before they could be taken seriously by their peers. The story of Sophia's remarkable night of learning and healing would eventually become one of the most significant discoveries in the history of animal cognition research. But for now, it remained a private mystery shared between two dedicated researchers and a bear family whose intelligence and emotional depth had challenged everything they thought they knew about the natural world. The questions raised by these observations would drive new research initiatives and philosophical discussions for years to come, opening up entirely new understanding of consciousness and intelligence throughout the animal kingdom. As they prepared for another night of observation and documentation, both Ethan and Lily understood that they had been privileged to witness something truly extraordinary. A glimpse into the hidden depths of animal intelligence that suggested the boundaries between human and non-human consciousness might be far more fluid and permeable than anyone had ever imagined. The mystery was far from solved, but the journey toward understanding had begun, and it promised to reveal wonders about the natural world that would continue to amaze and inspire for generations to come. The smartphone remained with Sophia in her new den, a silent testament to the extraordinary events of the previous night, and a symbol of the unexpected connections that could exist between human technology and animal intelligence. Its presence served as a reminder that the natural world was full of mysteries waiting to be discovered, and that the most profound insights often came from the most unexpected sources and circumstances. Several weeks passed before Ethan and Lily felt ready to venture into the forest to retrieve the smartphone and gather additional evidence of the remarkable events they had witnessed. The cub had made a complete recovery, showing no lasting effects from its serious injury and displaying the normal playful behavior expected of a young bear. Sophia had returned to her typical foraging and teaching routines, but both researchers noticed subtle changes in her behavior that suggested the learning experience had left lasting impacts on her cognitive development. When they finally located the smartphone, they discovered that its memory contained a detailed record of the websites and videos that had been accessed during that crucial night. The search history revealed a systematic progression through various medical and first aid resources, focusing specifically on wound treatment, infection prevention, and emergency care techniques. The pattern of access suggested not random browsing, but purposeful research conducted by an intelligence seeking specific information to address a particular problem. The video content that Sophia had accessed included detailed instructions for cleaning and dressing wounds, proper techniques for applying pressure to control bleeding, and methods for creating antiseptic solutions using natural materials. The correlation between the information she had viewed and the techniques she had subsequently applied to treat her cub's injury was undeniable, providing concrete evidence of learning and knowledge application that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal cognitive capabilities. Lily's analysis of the medical techniques Sophia had used revealed a level of sophistication that impressed even experienced veterinary professionals. The bear had somehow managed to understand and apply complex medical principles that typically required extensive training for human practitioners to master. Her improvised surgical instruments and natural pharmaceuticals demonstrated not just intelligence, but genuine expertise in emergency medical care that suggested cognitive abilities far beyond anything previously documented in wild animals. The implications of their discovery extended far beyond animal behavior research, touching on fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, intelligence, and learning throughout the natural world. If Sophia could acquire and apply complex medical knowledge through observation of digital content, it raised profound questions about what other capabilities might exist in species previously considered to have limited intellectual abilities. The scientific community's response to their findings was initially skeptical, as might be expected when confronted with claims that challenged core assumptions about animal cognition. But the extensive documentation Ethan and Lily had gathered, combined with the physical evidence of Sophia's medical techniques and the smartphone's browsing history, gradually convinced even the most conservative researchers that something extraordinary had indeed occurred in that remote forest. The story of Sophia's remarkable learning experience became a catalyst for new research initiatives focused on understanding the hidden depths of animal intelligence and consciousness. Universities and research institutions around the world began developing new methodologies for studying animal cognition, incorporating technology interfaces and digital learning environments that might reveal previously unknown capabilities in various species. The philosophical implications of the discovery were equally profound, challenging long-held assumptions about the uniqueness of human intelligence and the nature of a consciousness itself. If a wild bear could learn complex medical procedures by watching instructional videos, it suggested that the boundaries between human and animal consciousness might be far more permeable than previously imagined, opening up entirely new perspectives on the relationship between different forms of intelligence and awareness. Years later, as Ethan and Lily continued their research into animal cognition and learning, they would often reflect on that extraordinary night when Sophia had demonstrated capabilities that transformed their understanding of the natural world. The bear family had long since moved on to other territories, but the impact of their brief encounter with human technology had created ripple effects that continued to influence scientific research and philosophical thinking about consciousness and intelligence throughout the animal kingdom. The smartphone that had served as the bridge between human knowledge and animal intelligence was eventually retired to a place of honor in Ethan's research laboratory, where it served as a reminder of the unexpected connections that could exist between technology and nature. Its presence inspired countless students and researchers to approach their work with greater openness to possibilities that might initially seem impossible, encouraging them to look beyond conventional assumptions about the limits of animal cognition and consciousness. The mystery of how Sophia had managed to navigate the smartphone's interface and comprehend complex medical information remained partially unsolved, but the evidence of her learning and application of that knowledge was undeniable. The incident had opened up entirely new avenues of research into animal intelligence, digital learning interfaces, and the potential for technology to serve as a bridge between human knowledge and animal consciousness. As the scientific community continued to grapple with the implications of Sophia's remarkable demonstration of learning and problem-solving abilities, new questions emerged about what other capabilities might exist in the natural world, waiting to be discovered and understood. The boundaries between human and animal intelligence had been challenged in ways that would influence research and thinking for decades to come, opening up possibilities for understanding consciousness and awareness that extended far beyond traditional academic disciplines. The story ultimately served as a powerful reminder that the natural world was full of mysteries and wonders that could surprise and inspire even the most experienced researchers. It demonstrated the importance of remaining open to possibilities that might initially seem impossible, and the value of careful observation and documentation in revealing the hidden depths of intelligence and consciousness that existed throughout the animal kingdom. The connection between Sophia's desperate need to save her cub and her remarkable ability to acquire and apply medical knowledge through digital technology had created a bridge between human and animal consciousness that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of intelligence and learning. This bridge suggested that the capacity for complex thought, problem-solving, and emotional depth might be far more widespread throughout the natural world than anyone had previously imagined, opening up entirely new perspectives on the relationship between different forms of consciousness and awareness. The legacy of that extraordinary night would continue to influence scientific research, philosophical thinking, and public understanding of animal intelligence for generations to come, serving as a testament to the remarkable capabilities that could emerge when desperation, intelligence, and opportunity converged in the most unexpected circumstances. The mystery had revealed new depths of wonder about the natural world, and the questions it raised would continue to drive discovery and understanding long into the future.